So welcome, welcome. I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, prescription for your transformation, real people, real conversations, and real success. And so we have to wonder, how effective are we in communicating with the world around us? And in fact, really honestly, with the world within us. And what's interesting to note is that when you listen to other people or when you're listening to yourself, have you ever asked yourself what kind of impact are you really having? And so if you begin to ask that question, then you really have to ask your question, well, what is it that I can do better? What is it that I'm not doing? Is this really difficult? And then we get into this rat race in our head, kind of wondering, how effective are we really? Are we really doing the right thing? And then kind of messing it up anyhow. And so the truth is, and we'll discover this tonight, is that it really doesn't take a lot of effort to really connect with the essence of who you really are so that you can display that to the world and be so much more effective and connected and fulfilled in your entire life. And the magician, the magic unicorn that can actually bring this all together is together with me tonight is Minna Taylor from Energize Your Voice. So thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Oh, I'm so excited to have this. You just made that sound really awesome. I wish I were listening.
Well, isn't that part of speaking your voice? You got to listen first.
Listening is the I always tell people, don't worry about what's in here. Everything you need is outside of you.
I love it.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious about the voice, and it's fun for me particularly today because as I listen to you, and I'm just enjoying the magnificence of your voice because it's how should I put it? I mean, it's not like it's not overpowering. It's almost so unassumingly natural that the things that you share with me right away really dive right into my unconscious mind, and I get connected with that. I mean, is that really what we're talking about? Is that why you speak magically, and that's why people call you that?
Uh, because I'm able to penetrate them without them even knowing it, and before
Right.
they've even realized that I've taken hold. Uh, yeah, first of all, this didn't happen by accident. I have been training in a vocal practice for 16 years, and I teach it, and it's a foundation of every aspect of the way in which I approach communication. Even if we're looking at, pitching a new startup, it all comes down to breath and how are you releasing vibration. But I think all too often what happens is we conflate voice and vibration. And our perception of what voice is actually what we would like to be vibration, but we are not educated on how to access that effectively. And by really putting your trust and belief in your power to vibrate effectively, that's when you can maintain connection because humans are vibrational beings. And I know that sounds a little sort of conceptual, but ultimately we're not trying to shout at one another. We're trying to connect to one another, and you're going to do that through energetic wavelengths. And the more you can allow yourself access to being able to express those wavelengths effectively with as little disruption as possible, the more you're going to be able to penetrate your listener.
So said differently, so not so complicated, right? So are you then basically saying that, when you are finding yourself in an authentic space where you're able to actually speak your own truth and forget about how you're speaking that voice, then that voice is going to come out naturally. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
you're absolutely right. Because really what happens is once we try to manufacture truth, once we try to predetermine what other people expect of us and live in that space, rather than what happens to the body in that is all of a sudden I think performance time.
Right.
Or my gosh, now there's opportunity to fail, to look foolish, to make mistakes, to mess it up. And it's in those moments when we don't have a mindset toward external obligation, but rather we show up with the pure intention of presence
Right.
and saying, you know what, I'm just going to sort of say what I feel, and I'm going to maybe use my voice in a way that feels a little bit silly. And that's when the body is at ease. And when the body's not at ease is when people can determine, hey, there's a lack of vibration happening here. And then it creates this potentially unconscious, but sometimes conscious space of mistrust between the two listeners. And that's really where freedom comes and truth is available, when trust is deeply present.
So when people then, in essence, kind of tell you, I mean, not you specifically, but in general, so well, use your voice and use these particular tools, they're not really talking about the same thing that you talk.
No.
What's the difference?
Yeah, that's one of my big challenges, honestly, with a lot of the way that people approach the concept of public speaking or presentation skills, is they look at volume over vibration. And I can get loud. Listen, I can be loud, but you don't want to listen to it. It's not pleasant. And again, because your body can't absorb it in the same way. Think about that egg toss game. You know, it's like if you cushion it,
Right.
the egg won't break. If you brace against it, it'll splatter. So it's a similar experience when you're not hearing a fully warm voice. But some of the techniques that people use are all in service of volume rather than deepening vibration, and we're not taught physically how to create either one of those experiences effectively. And vibration, your body has to chill out. Now, that doesn't mean relax, right? That's not, I'm totally checked out of the situation. That means I'm still fully present, but my body is working as little as possible. And this is sort of an Alexander technique principle. My body's working as little as possible in order to feel present, feel strong, feel agile, but most importantly, be available to a fully functioning, fully capacious breath mechanism.
So then comes to mind that I would imagine that the kind of work that you do, in essence, is like three parts. So part of it is behavioral strategies or psychology, if you will. The middle part is just, in essence, presence and breathing and relaxing. And then the other part is the specific aspects of the voice and vibration itself. I mean, would that be an accurate assessment of the kind of work that you help people with?
Yeah, I think so. I think the last part I would maybe house in the middle, and I would switch the first and the second. A lot of times people think, and this is similar to a yoga practice, oh, I need to know why, or I need to know how, or I need to know, these are all the things that I experience. I need to figure it out
Right.
cognitively. And I'm a firm believer that, you know what, at the end of the day, your body owns your history. And if we can address the body first, maybe we don't even need to understand why, but we've already moved you beyond it from a habit level. So I typically like to start with the body and the breath and the voice, and then move into this more sort of general, like you mentioned, behavioral strategies, so mental agility training, impulsive responsiveness, using improv as a huge tool for that, impulsive storytelling. And then the third component I would really list as how to put that all into practical context.
Right.
Why am I doing this? Is this because I want to feel better as an executive? Do I want to lead my team more effectively? Do I have to give keynotes consistently? And am I tired of the traditional formula for effective presentation? And what if I really just say, I feel actually I'm enough, but I can tell that there's some sort of blockage for me being able to really show up and be as dynamic and expressive as I want to be. And that doesn't mean casual. It means polished but present. Right. So I tell people that public speaking is talking on steroids. And I would say that it's the same thing for leadership, right? You got to amp it up a little bit, but you should still feel like yourself. Yeah, it should still be your voice. And that's what people are ultimately going to respond to most, rather than trying to fit into what you expect that people want.
Right. So what I'm getting from that really is then it's discovering, yourself and your best self, however that happens, being naturally you. I like to share with people, give yourself permission to be human. Give yourself permission to
Yes.
be you. Forget about the rest, really. And and not even worry what people are going to think. And then the second part is, what are the specific strategies, if you will, that you can then inspire others? Because, you can be yourself, but I mean, if you're kind of a little drab and laid back, I mean, you're not necessarily going to connect with everybody else's vibration. So it's
Mhm.
that part where you know how to communicate if you want to be a great leader.
Yeah.
And part of what my passion, my purpose in life, and this is why this is fun for me, is, I want to inspire others to dream again. And so that's why I do all these things. And so part of what I'm looking for personally is, using my voice effectively, and also, learning much more about myself. So I'm comfortable with myself.
Yeah.
And I think the fun part, because right before the show, we're talking about all your cute little voices. Sometimes they drive people nuts, right?
Yeah.
Um, but the truth is, we get to be a little kid again, and
Oh,
being
yeah.
playful. How much of that do you bring in the work that you do?
100% all the time. My whole thing is if you're feeling ineffective, every way in which you can conceive of your ability to activate is in you. It's through learned historical behavior, through muscular tensions and habits and cognitive limitations that have become ingrained for whatever reason, that we now diminish our capability for expression. But think back to when we were kids, it was all like, you could
Right.
have a piece of string and a shoe and be by yourself, frankly, and like have a blast. And, and and you would use all different voices, you would use your body in dynamic ways. And let me say, people on the other end of this cyber world might be thinking, well, no, I never did that. I was just very still and I was just very simple. And what I really like to say is there's a huge spectrum from introvert to extrovert, right? And the way that we show up can be expansively dynamic, or it can be beautifully simplistic, but still fully on vibration. Right? So we can have all of these different ways of showing up, but it can still be playful, because to me, playful equals curious. So as long as I'm curious, as long as I'm willing to take risks, as long as I'm willing to get on my bike and fall and skin my knee and get back up again, then I can understand what my full capability is. So whenever I work with clients, we start with something really simple. It's like, how big can you make your body? When's the last time you felt energy through the tips of your fingers, through the tips of your toes, and stuck your tongue out all the way? How big can you make it? And in that activation, what happens to the breath? Do you stop breathing? Oh, there's a habit. That's worth noting, right? So how can I sort of build all these practices in together and then ultimately allow the voice to be present within that, and then add the technique as that last element?
You said a key word which resonates. I think it's taking a risk, and so many people are just, afraid of that risk, afraid of the failure, afraid of the judgment, afraid of the rejection, and just lack that self-confidence where they can say, hey, you know what? I'm just great as I am, and however the chips will fall, they'll fall, and I'm going to have fun in the meantime.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and before the show also we were talking about singing, right? And I said I'm not a singing teacher, I'm just a talking teacher, I'm a voice teacher. But one thing about singing that I can relate to, and people are always surprised when I say this, but I am terrified of singing in public.
Is that
I'm
right?
I'm terrified of it. Yeah, because I have a context. I can fully own that, right? I have a context around this idea because I'm hitting notes, right? So all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, there's like an actual place where my voice has to go. And so it's a real point of tension for me, and I've definitely gotten better at it over the years. But it's a great example where you can hear when someone's singing in public and their voice is tight around it.
Right.
And in that moment of liberation, even if they're hitting wrong notes, but they are just fully letting the voice go, no one is sitting there being like, nope, that was a B flat. Nope, they hit the wrong thing. Oh man, they got the chorus wrong. They're just thinking like, yes, they are so joyful, right? They are so in their space, and that's what people are responding to. I tell my clients all the time, being fallible is ultimately human, and people want to see those flaws because it makes you so much more accessible. People want to see themselves up there. They don't want to see a robot. They want to see a human and remain engaged. And if it's too perfect, then people will know what to anticipate, and then they'll check out. That's when they get on Facebook and they're like, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah, I heard this before.
It's again, and you said it in a different way, is not taking things personally, just showing up and not taking it personally, and just be happy with who you are, and quite frankly, as I like to put it, it's a journey of mistakes and learning from those mistakes and constantly making better, and constantly looking at your successes and what's working, and not getting stuck with the failures. And I still catch myself not often, I shouldn't say all the time, but often, like, why haven't I done this before? And this should have happened, years ago. And then instead of focusing, wow, I had a great day. I had this success. I did this and I did that, and not focus on what I didn't do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and how I really like to look at that, and this can be applied to this situation that you're speaking to, or to any communication, whether that's an interview for a job, a first date conversation, a challenging conversation with your parents, whatever it is, you need to show up in those conversations knowing that your experience will fall into two categories. And this is really simplistic. And I think the challenge for people in all the work that I do is that it's actually really simple. It's hard to activate into habit, but it's really simple. So one of the simple principles that I try to enforce upon people is the two categories: what's in your control and what's out of your control. So ultimately, the past is now out of your control. So that shoulda, coulda, woulda mentality
Yep.
is no longer applicable. Right? So currently in this present moment, what's within your control? And in a public speaking scenario, that can mean practicing effectively, but not over practicing, doing a warm up, getting a good night's rest, being familiar with the material, being in your breath, in your body, and really committed to not being self-focused or ego-focused, but rather being fully in a place of generosity and compassion to share the value that you are there to communicate. And beyond that, everything else is out of your control. Even if you forget a line, right? You couldn't have predicted that. You couldn't have done everything in your power to fight against that. Because if you do, now you're not showing up presently because you're worried about being perfect. So all you can do that's in your control is to show up presently. You cannot show up with a mindset of perfection or a mindset of any sort of expectation or roadmap for how things should go.
Yep.
Because you will always go off course, and if you're stuck on that, you will endlessly disrupt your journey.
And I think what would be helpful for anybody listening tonight is, trust your intuition, trust your body. I mean, your body is your truth sayer. Whether you're going to acknowledge it or not, if you don't acknowledge it, it's going to come out in your voice and your behavior and everything else. And so when it comes out, you're going to get that feedback that, well, this isn't feeling right. And so in essence, checking in with, who you really are, being present, and enjoying the moment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's it. And here's the thing. So really when you become super familiar with this, and that's a scary place to live, and people always say, oh, well, that feels reckless, or that feels really scary, or that feels vulnerable, or how can I be in control in that moment? And once those practices are put into place, that's when we build the strategy component into it. So then you can be fully authentic and fully present with an ultimate sense of strategy and objective. Those two can coexist. We are not trying to remove that sense of mindfulness. We are trying to make that sense of mindfulness so present, and
Right.
that ease of body and vibration and expressiveness so present that they're working in unison. And then it becomes this beautiful activation of purpose and presence. And
Yep.
that's when people feel your power. That's when it becomes really magnetic.
And honestly, that's exactly how you're coming across right now too. So I love it. I've loved every second of our conversation before the show and right now. And so, how do people find you? And I know you're a coach or a trainer. You do private sessions. You also do workshops. So share with our listeners, what is it that you do and how people can get a hold of you.
Yeah. Well, you'll see me. I'm usually walking around. If you're in New York, I'll be the girl in the headphones who like has dance breaks on the sidewalk. But I always pull over first because I'm conscious. You can go to my website. That's the easiest place.
Okay.
It's energizeyourvoice.net. And that gives you a pretty high level overview of what it is that we do. To give you a really succinct understanding, we have our communication consulting aspect of it, and then we incorporate large data as a way to support all of the uh, trainings that we do to really measure the impact of what that is. So we have a behavioral strategist and scientist on staff who takes care of that. But we work with private coaching and public group classes looking at storytelling, public speaking, presentation skills, and then we can really customize stuff beyond that. We've been approached a few times for customer experience training and emotional intelligence road mapping for those cold calls. So it's really, we can dig deep in terms of what your culture and community is looking to activate. We work pretty exclusively with corporations for group training. With private coaching, we always love to support people and see how we can work together. We obviously, like every other coach, like to make sure that it's a good fit. But find us through a website. Let's get the conversation started. Honestly, I'm just like, I love knowing how people are curious about this work and if there's a way in which we can support you in the most acute way possible, because everybody is different. So there's not a one size fits all approach, and it's really about saying, what do you need and how can we support you?
I have to admit, I think a lot of people take this part of our lives so much for granted. We just learn how to speak from an early age, and no one has really taken the time to help us, speak properly, if you will.
Uh-huh.
Language is a big thing. And what language do we use? That's coming, much more in the forefront in the coaching world, where people are focusing on language and being very specific in the words, because the words have meaning. But the part that's just missing, and that's why I'm so excited to have talked to you today, is the part that you're bringing, up front. And my hope is that a lot of people will find you. My hope is that I get to help you personally as well in getting people connected with you, because, at the end of the day, we all have a purpose in this world. And the better that we can manifest that, through our voice and through our connection, the more fulfillment that we'll have, and the better this whole world will be. And so your part is such an important part. And
Thank you.
you're welcome. And with that, what are your last, comments that you'd like to share with people as a key message point that they can take home with and make a difference in their life?
I just thought of something. I want to give people one thing to think about and then one practice to put in place. Can
Okay.
I do that? Okay.
Yeah.
So one thing, I teach phonetics as well. That's one of our specialties from a coaching perspective, accent reduction. And we really look at it as articulation over accent, right? So to your point, this idea of language and what does that mean? I always tell people, put your emphasis on the consonants of your sounds. The
Mm,
consonants are the action sounds in anything that you're saying. And then the vowels are where the emotion lies. And this goes back to Shakespeare. So if we can really think about finding space to play with the vowels, play with elongating, moving through all the different tones we have, but then really, noshing down on those consonants, that's going to challenge us to be really mindful of what it is that's ultimately coming out of our mouth. It's going to force us to slow down, and you'll become hyper aware of how your voice, breath, and words are all being married together. So I'm going to challenge people after they watch this podcast for a week to be super hyper conscious of all of the consonants that are coming out of your mouth. So that's one thing. And then the little exercise I want to give you to start saying, okay, what is my breath doing and what is my voice doing? Super simple. A lot of singers will know this. It's going to be a lip buzz moving up and down through the entire range of the voice. And when I say take a deep breath, I'm going to say breathe through your mouth. And we're going to breathe into the belly button, the lower back, and the pelvic floor. All right, so
okay.
the root chakra. So deep breath in and then lip buzz out, up and down through the range. So it looks like this. And it seems super simple, and you might
Right.
find initially that you're like, I can't even move my lips like that. What a great practice. Super simple thing. It's like a Rubik's Cube. You can become obsessed
Uh-huh.
with it and try to master it.
And how specifically is that going to help again?
It's going to allow you to understand the way in which you're either restricting or allowing space for breath, how the
Right.
breath is supporting the voice. And then any tension here is going to tell you directly how you're tensing up in the stomach, which is really where the voice gets compromised most effectively. So thinking about dropping that breath, allowing the voice to be free in vibration, and then it's going to allow you to cultivate that dynamic range, which gives you that sense of peaks and valleys in the way that your voice is working.
Well, I'm definitely going to try that one.
Cool.
Maybe I'll start all my shows with that right now.
Do it.
So, anyhow, Minna, thank you so much for today. It's been absolutely delightful. And once again, how do people find you?
energizeyourvoice.net. You can also find us on Instagram at energizeyourvoice. And always direct message us. We are all about the conversation. I always say, use me, don't abuse me, but definitely like hit me up, and we always get back to you within 24 hours to start the conversation and see how we can potentially collaborate.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Magic Unicorn.
Ooh.
And I am Dr. Bart Rademaker, prescription for your transformation, real people, real conversations, real success. Talking to Minna Taylor, energize your voice. And I'll be back this coming Thursday. So thank you.